It's a good cup of tea. If I asked you, do you have free will? You'd probably say, sure, Osher. I decide what I do, when I decide to do it, and when I decided to do it. That's what it is. But what if that wasn't the case? What if everything you're doing, including the choice to watch this right now, was simply a reaction to your genetics and to your environment? My guest this week is Professor George Paxinos, AO. He is a leading global neuroscientist who studied at Berkeley, McGill, and Yale, and is Professor of Medical Sciences at NeuRA and the University of New South Wales in Sydney. George has mapped more parts of the brain than anyone in history. There's very little that he doesn't know about our brains and why we do the things we do when we do them. George is a passionate environmental activist. He has combined his enormous knowledge about human behaviour with his deep desire to agitate for shifts in thinking around how we alter our environment with his thrilling novel, A River Divided. Yes, he's written squillions of books, most of them academic, but now he's written a novel, and it's astounding. He is an incredible human, and I just can't wait for you to get to know him. Let me tell you about my guest today. Professor George Paxinos, AO, is a leading global neuroscientist. He studied at Berkeley, McGill in Canada, Yale. He's Professor of Medical Sciences at NeuRA and the University of New South Wales in Sydney. George has mapped more parts of the human brain than anyone in history. Now, because he is, among other things, a cerebral cartographer, literally a map maker of the brain, he has identified and named more brain areas than any other person in history. Only 4 years ago, he discovered an entirely new structure thought to be involved in fine motor movement, which he gave the snappy among brain experts name of endorestiform nucleus. Because where are we without a map? We need a map to get to work, to school. I need a map to get around the supermarket. When dealing with the human brain, understanding which parts might be working properly, might be working too hard or not working at all, these things have all been vital in my own journey of recovery from complex mental illness and addiction, particularly around my dopamine and serotonin responses and my amygdala fear response. Now, helping understand how these things weren't working properly helped me and my doctors find effective ongoing treatment and management of a brain that has given me the career and the life that I have, but has caused problems in the past when it is out of control, or when I was trying to regulate and try to bring it into control with drugs and alcohol, which didn't work. George is an incredibly inspiring man. In his 8th decade, on the day we spoke, he had just been for a bicycle ride, a swim in the Mediterranean, and had a nap. Absolutely living the dream and the picture of how a vital life is possible as we get older. George possibly has a better understanding of how we as humans react to our environment, and indeed how in altering our environment, we've changed not only our planet, but also our ability to choose a different path. To explore this concept after a career of publishing some of the most successful and referenced scientific books of all time, George has written his very first novel. A River Divided explores the not too much of a stretch scenario where a geneticist clones Christ twice. The twin boys grow up in entirely different environments, one in middle-class Sydney and the other one in the slums of Buenos Aires. Now, just a note, as we do get into this conversation, even though we approach the ideas from a clinical perspective, we do go into the territory of domestic violence, of sexual abuse, and of suicide. It's important we go there because all of those things are actions that started as ideas in somebody's brain. And understanding how brains work can one day, hopefully, help us understand how to prevent those things completely. He's a fascinating human. I'm so grateful you get the chance to meet him today because he's just radiant. He's a radiant, delightful human being. And I adored every moment of this conversation with George Paxinos. I hope you do too. George, it's so incredible to see you today. Where are you in the world right now?
On a mountain on Ithaca, an island in the Ionian Sea. It's part of the Mediterranean Sea. The routine here is you cycle. Well, I cycle in the morning, then go for a swim, and I'm speaking to you now.
Oh, hang on a second. You're on a mountain in Greece and you ride your bicycle, I'm guessing down and then up the mountain, go for a swim, and then have breakfast and then hang out for the day?
Well, you sleep the siesta around 3 o'clock because they tend to stay late here. So then you can hang out until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. In the afternoon, it's hot.
You are pretty much describing my dream life too. I'm just going to show you what's hanging on my wall over here, George, because see what's happening over there. That's my.
All right.
That's my.
Yes.
I've just showed George my bicycle that I haven't ridden in a little while because of what's going on with my leg, but I'm so happy. What do you like about cycling, George?
Well, firstly, every time I go in St. Daniel Park in Sydney, where I cycle daily, I smile. It's exercise, but a pleasurable exercise. Swimming is nice too, but there you cannot put on a podcast and listen and have something else at the same time. And much like the other exercise, of course, it gets you in a reasonable physical state and it postpones your dementia. Nothing. Neuroscientists don't know many things. They actually have not cured any disease, but they do know that physical exercise postpones dementia. So it is walking, running, swimming, rowing, cycling.
Tell me, George, because I wonder if this is true for you, because I know what happens for me, but I'm interested. What happens to you when you have a problem you need to solve and then you go for a bicycle ride? Tell me what happens.
Yes, I find that the mind is more lucid at that time. Somehow I can find a solution I used to be in running, that I came up with some solutions that were not tractable when I was trying in my office. Yeah, so there is an opportunity in a different mindset for some idea to come to you. I even dictate things on my iPhone so that I won't forget them. I have that problem of getting a solution and then not remembering it.
It's so interesting to hear, someone whose entire career, first psychology and then the most successful brain mapper in the history of the science, to be describing how he uses his own brain in the thinking that he has to do. It's fascinating, mate.
We suffer from the same things as everybody, and the only nice thing I was told recently is that my brain has not shrunk as much as expected for my age. I volunteered for an experiment that required my age cohort, and that was the good news. So if there's one thing that I can wish to your listeners is that their brain shrinks less than expected for their age. And of course, neuroscientists have come up with some ideas to avoid no smoking, no excessive drinking, attending to diabetes, and of course, their weight, not live on busy streets, breathing exhaust, attend to sleep apnea, avoid depression if they can do that. And exercise, of course, can help with that. Anything that you think that doesn't sound like a healthy thing, diet, for example, all these things, the bad things, are predictors for earlier onset of Alzheimer's than otherwise. Just consider either you or me, Osher, will be dementing at 85. 50% of the people.
That's really, It's a coin flip.
Yeah, that's right.
I have this idea that I want to go fit, dead. I'm not interested in who are you? I'm not interested in that. And I've even told my wife, I said, the day I don't recognize you, don't worry about it. I'm gone.
Yeah, exactly. That would be the ideal. The country itself would rather have you in that way, not to exhaust the health system, to keep going healthily and then
Yes.
go.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I would like to know, George, tell me about your relationship with rats.
Yes. Psychologists, at least behavioral neuroscientists, principally they study the rat or the mouse, and they construct animal models of disease there. As a graduate student, I did my PhD on the sexual behavior of the rat, as well as neural factors controlling eating, drinking, irritability, aggression. The rats are aggressive against mice. Most rats will kill mice. And I was looking at neural mechanisms that control these behaviors. And after that, my relation with the rat was that on a trip to Cambridge on sabbatical, I happened upon a stain that showed the brain as though it was a colored-in book that was colored in already. And I thought, yeah, I thought I would be able to do a better atlas of the rat brain than what was existing at that time, more accurate. And at that time, I was influenced by something someone said. The gain in the brain is mainly in the stain. And I thought I'd be able to construct an atlas that would be useful to people, more accurate. And now, it was early on, like, in fact, 40 years, this year, the rat brain in stereotaxic coordinates came out. And being an atlas maker is not always without shortcomings. I introduced myself to a lady at a neuroscience meeting not long ago, and she had used the atlas when it first came out to do her PhD on it. And she said, "George Paxinos, I thought you were dead."
That's extraordinary. It's the most successful book in its field. 40 years, an incredible legacy. What is it about rat brains that people who are studying human brains, why rat brains? Why not chimpanzee brains? Why not goldfish brains?
That's right. Chimpanzee, of course, would be far closer to us. In fact, there are no differences in the brain of the chimpanzee in areas, no more additional areas. There are no additional areas in the human brain that are in the chimpanzee brain. So to whatever else you might resemble the divine usher, in your brain, you are made in the image of the chimpanzee. It is, of course, a smaller brain, 600 grams rather than 1,300 grams that our brain is. And it would be, of course, far closer, and the observations would be far more relevant and valid, but it would be very unconscionable to work with a chimpanzee or for the things we do, for example, to isolate a chimpanzee. If you isolate the rat, you do not see him lose weight. He doesn't seem to be depressed. But if you do so into a primate, like the monkeys, chimpanzees, then you will see that. And we can study, scientists can study many things in the rat that they can then extrapolate to the human with, of course, follow-up observations. And what the scientists would really love to do is to construct an animal model of disease, such as schizophrenia, depression, Parkinsonism, or epilepsy. And once they have the rat model, be it genetic or environmentally caused with some drugs, then can see what can be given to this animal to assist. And then they can try the same thing for the humans. And
Yeah.
what we do is provide the maps so that they can navigate seamlessly between the brain of humans and experimental animals to test hypotheses inspired by human considerations and then relate their observations back to the human. It's really like a UBD of a city, or if you want to elevate it, a Google map in 3D in our case, because the brain is a three-dimensional object.
I think about, my brain, 1,300 grams, is so different from a rat brain. But then when I think about some of the modeling, some of the mechanistic data that comes out of experiments on rats, George, I'm 12 years sober now. And when I first read about the Skinner box, I was like, okay, yes. Like, it made complete sense to me that maybe I'm not that different after all. Maybe I'm driven by something not at all divine, just something's quite base.
Well, the point of Skinner, and I had the pleasure of meeting him. I invited him to give a talk at McGill University when I was a graduate student running the colloquium in psychology at McGill. And the point that he made is that behavior is the outcome of two and only two factors: genetic endowment, over which, of course, we have no choice, and the environmental influences on it, which is whether your mother was smoking, whether you were born in this society or another society, whether they forced you in this religion or in another religion. And consequently, there is no freedom whatsoever. His book is beyond freedom and dignity. That is, we are genes that are sculpted by the environment, much like, in fact, I wrote a book that I think you've come across, A River Divided, which is identical twins raised apart, and much like two different artists would sculpt different statues from the same block of marble. Different environments produce different characters, even in identical twins. So yes, this is what the psychologists say. By and large, there are some neuroscientists who have a different view, and they think that there's a modicum of free will somewhere, freedom light, Coca-Cola light. But by and large, neuroscientists think that we are the product of our genetic endowment and our genes, and there's no crevice in the march, genes, environment for free will to wiggle in.
Okay, so the idea that I can control my own outcomes is like what, a bit flawed? I mean, I can change my environment a bit. I got lucky. I got born white, male, middle class, and I live in Australia, so I got really lucky. But some people aren't that lucky, George.
Right. But the idea that you can change your environment is a very good point you're raising. But to want to change your environment, it has to, the brain will make that decision. And the brain will make the decision on the basis of genetic endowment, with some predispositions it might have conferred to you, and the influence of the environment on that brain that molded up to today. So you are a slave. We are all slaves of yesterday. The issue is that psychologists are clever. They have exploited this issue that today is tomorrow's yesterday, Osher. And therefore, what you're going to hear today can influence your brain, and tomorrow, under the same circumstances, you might make a different decision. I can bring you an example of an indication of lack of free will in one domain of life, in love. Now, in love, you might have heard of people saying, I want to get rid of my love for this person, but I can't. Am I correct? Have you heard that? Maybe you have even felt it yourself.
Oh, yeah. Like, say, for example, you're with someone who you know is, I can relate. I've been in a relationship with someone who is completely inappropriate for me. It wasn't right. And it was very difficult to change my feelings for this person.
Exactly. If you had free will over the domain of love, then you should be able to just transfer your emotions to someone who is more appropriate to you, who feels the love. You've got the paradox of those who are abandoned interfering with the person who abandoned them at their home, the internet, their work. They might hit her, they might kill her, they might commit suicide before they would accept the love of someone who loves them and forget about this person who doesn't love them anymore. They also don't realize, because they haven't listened to the neuroscientists, that much like they cannot jettison a love that torments them, the other person, the object of their love, cannot make themselves love them. You fall in love. And this is, of course, one domain, but if you look at other domains, who would not like to get rid of undesirable desires, of obsessions, compulsions? The puppet is free. We are puppets of our brain, and we are free only to the extent that we love our strings, said Sam Harris.
He's too young to be as clever as he is, George. He really is. He's a excruciatingly clever human being. But to come to the idea that there is no free will, where does that leave, I guess, entire nations that are built on self-determination? What happens then?
That's right. There will be cultures that will produce the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. If I could bring you an example of a country that followed the path which was destructive to them and to the rest of the world, Germany, during the war, before and during the war, the same DNA, in fact, the same people, their children, and many of the same people live now in Germany. And Germany is one of the best citizens in the world as it concerns the environment. And they have reneged on the Nazi past. So you can have the environment induce certain things. If you and I were born in a country where they stoned women for allegedly burning their holy books, you and I would have equal probability in participating in the stoning as people born there now. If we accept that, then it is an indication that we are products of our genes and our environment. And in these things, you have the same genes in Germany, having different outcome depending on the circumstances around them. So, yeah, the self-determination and all that, the tribalism, in many ways, that is this tendency is, many people have commented, of course, evolutionary biologists, on these things, that it was adaptive for the early stages of humanity when allegiance to the tribe will give you the protection of the tribe. And now, of course, this is counterproductive. And you have the paradox of a species that considers itself sapient, that is clever, to arm with nuclear weapons that are capable of destroying the whole planet. Putin, Trump, Kim Il-sung. If we reflect back on the human, the only explanation I can see is that we are a primate that has a brain that is large enough to cause some problems, but not large enough to understand the problems. That is, our brain is not in the Goldilocks zone. You're familiar with the concept of the Earth being in the habitable zone around the sun. But if our brain, the syllogism that I have written in the novel that I wrote, is that if the brain were smaller than what it is, it would not have been able to produce the science that today produce the technology that threatens existence. If, on the other hand, the brain were larger than what it is, it might have been able to understand the problem, even solve it. The brain is just not the right size. And I'm asking, shall we reflect on us? Who are we? Are we in delusion to think that we have a soul, that we have free will, and we are made in the image of God? Is that perhaps a triple delusion that undermines any efforts that we should be taking to understand who we are in the whole scheme and accordingly adjust our behavior?
There's so much to every sentence you say. There's so much to unpack, George. But A River Divided is the novel that you wrote, and the idea of, like, I think Stephen King, every single book is in Bangor, Maine. All right, because that's what he knows. He knows Maine. He knows all the weird places around Bangor, Maine. Your book is completely drawn on your entire wealth of knowledge about exactly what we've been discussing: genetics, environment, brain mapping, habitual responses, and taken it to the extreme. And I guess I doubt the ethics of what happens in the book might be a little beyond where we are now, but it's not impossible to conceive that there's a human cloning experiment, and these two kids are brought up in completely different parts of the world with different opportunities. But then you have this chance to go, well, how can we take it one step further? And so what does a good Greek boy from the mountainside in Ithaca, Greece do when he's like, how can I make my characters have the highest stakes possible?
Yes, well, indeed, it asks a fundamental question. What would someone with the genetic endowment of Christ do if they were present today? Would he join Wall Street or street protests? And picking on Christ was not just incidental. He's an important moral philosopher, possibly one of the best, or if not the best. And also the behavior of those immediately after the early Christians is an indication of what might be needed to construct a sustainable society now. That is, you need a total reshape, a rethink of religion, science, and culture. It's not going to be easy. That is, we will not be able to travel around the world because we pollute the planet. A society that will be sustainable will make the old Soviet Union look like a libertarian society. It is going to be difficult, and I haven't heard this actually said, that firstly, the reproductive cycle of the productivity of humans, that is, the population will have to be looked at. And here, of course, science comes against religion. And if you thought that religion was treating women unkindly, spare a thought of how it is treating the environment. And in my novel, I have a character who is actually deeply religious, but he is organizing a protest against overpopulation in Argentina, of that deeply Catholic country. And he also asks the question, he produces two sets of people: Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini on one hand, and on the other hand, Marie Curie, Nightingale, Mother Teresa. And he asks, what are the differences? What is a fundamental difference between these two groups of people? And of course, he didn't want superficial differences like good, bad, or male, female. For him, what he was looking for was ordination. All three in the first group are entitled to apply to become priests, but in the second group, they need not apply. And the church, with its obsession with, and all religions, not only the Christian church, with its obsession with sex, considering that HIV is evil, but not as evil as prophylactics, they actually resulting in overpopulation of the planet, help the overpopulation of the planet, and they are not pulling their weight. They are really a force that has to be overcome.
It must be extraordinarily difficult as someone who thinks about the world the way you do to see, we've just had, the last few years of power of a deeply religious man in charge of Australia as a prime minister. And only a few short weeks after he lost his job, was on a pulpit going, I believe that God will take care of it. And suddenly the last 15 years or whatever environmental policy makes sense to me. If you've got someone at the top job who's like, it'll be fine. I've been taught it'll be fine, so it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Must tear your hair out, George.
Yeah. But Osher, I am even more upset with us who elected him. And of course, I can see behind that who is manufacturing the consensus to vote for those people who bring coal to Parliament. And if only koalas could vote, none of the Australian government, state or federal, would be re-elected. In the wake of the largest fires on Earth and the expected, almost certain that is, loss of all corals in the Great Barrier Reef and elsewhere, and the expected simplification of life in the oceans, Australia remains the largest exporter of brown coal in the world, coal that stokes the fires that burn us, and we are the first continent to be degraded by climate change. It is a paradox that we will join Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Brazil, and previously the United States to sabotage the international efforts to stabilize climate.
You talked before about the idea that our brains are identical to chimpanzee brains. So yes, they're bigger, but they're identical to chimpanzee brains. And this, the hubris of humans to go, we are made in the image of God, There's also this hubris that we are separate from everything else on the planet. Everything else on the planet that exists in some sort of extraordinarily complicated symbiotic system, but somehow we don't belong to that. And therefore we make decisions outside of that, paradoxically, that destroy our ability to live in it.
Yes. Well, Darwin should have set aside human exceptionalism because he pointed out that there is no special creation for humans. In fact, there was no creation, but evolution, and that we belong to the primate group, and we have separated from the chimpanzee, the closest relative, about 5 to 7 million years ago. We are not descendant from the chimpanzee, neither the chimpanzees from us. We are cousins, much like if you look at the Greeks, for example, and you compare them with the Norwegians, most of the time you'll say, no, this person is Norwegian, taller, blue eyes, blonde hair, more likely. And then if you compare the Europeans with the Asians, you'll find that virtually always you can tell them apart. That's because they have divergent evolution in the last 20, 40,000 years. Well, if you extend that, then there will be further drift and you create new species. Our species specialization is a larger brain. Scientists don't know exactly why, but we exploited a different way of making our living on the planet, of planning, working in groups, social animals, as E.O. Wilson named us. That is, we are social, social animals. Other species have also specializations, like the giraffe that exploits the taller aspects of vegetation, a longer neck. So they can be proud of their neck, we can be proud of our brain, but we are part of this system. And evolution, of course, is evident even before our eyes, as in the virus, the COVID, that is evolving as we see it right now. So we are a product of evolution, a part of it, and unless we understand our place in this system and attend to our behavior and avoid this hubris that we are made in the image of God. The ancient gods were actually more human, more reasonable. They didn't like humans who were comparing themselves to God. And I told my granddaughter of 8 years of age that there was this king of Corinth who was punished by the gods to push a rock to the top of the hill only for it to fall down again, and he would have to push it back the next day. This was King Sisyphus, because he was narcissistic, egotistical, and insulting. And she said, like Trump. Yeah.
She's 8.
She's 8, that's right.
The idea that we spoke earlier, that we are the product of our environment, have we set up a reinforcing negative loop of our behavior around exploiting our environment? Is there a way that, George, we might be able to change things?
Well, the science is really the way out of these things on how to assist humans to cope with what's happening. But the goals have to be set, and we have against us our genetic endowment, that we are principally favoring the tribe. Nationalism, you see, in the ascendancy worldwide now. And the internet was supposed to come and help and enlighten people, is actually bringing the endarkenment. Science will lead us out of the pandemic, at least assisted us to suffer least from the pandemic than otherwise. And science will make mistakes, of course. It's not infallible, but it is self-correcting. And the Dutch do not trust the politicians to stop the North Sea from invading them. They trust the engineers, and we have to trust science. This is really what people say, most scientists say. Well, just see what works, and the behavioral modification that will be required to produce a sustainable society for you and me to give up our car and all of us get on the bicycle and to interfere with the reproductive cycle of humans, it would be huge. But whatever you're not allowed to do in your room in there, like bring your car in there and you have exhausts, you should not be allowed to do outside your room, because your car's exhaust will get with someone else's car's exhausts. And scientists can predict things, and they be pretty accurate in predicting where we will be. And they tell you the steps are inadequate that are being taken.
So what can we do, George? You mentioned the rise of tribalism, which is a nature of our genetic makeup, essentially. What can we do to challenge something like that?
That's right. Well, firstly, to say that I have no hope that humanity will be able to construct a sustainable society. But at the same time, there's nothing more important than try to achieve this. Certainly, a lot of humans will respond if they see the evidence. I mean, some will react much like "Don't Look Up," the video. That don't look up at the obvious thing, but a number will respond to at least make a decent effort to inform people. At the moment, a large sector of the media is actually propagating falsehoods as it concerns the environment and the denigrating the environmental scientists. The science is science, and it's the same science that benefited humanity from the virus and medicine in environmental science. But they have been attacked because, of course, the interests are too strong. $30 trillion locked up in reserves of oil, gas, and coal. And Australia, of course, looking myopically at the benefit from that, rather than the fact that if those are burnt, then so is Australia.
You've said you've got no hope, George. So how do you look your granddaughter in the eye? How do you get through?
Right. The issue with humans, I mean, this, Osher, I had with me this view since the 1970s. And yet I reproduced, I'm happy when I see my daughter have a child. That is what works for us, and what is the most depressing and problematic. If something close to us, like a sliver under our nail, is troubling us, if our child is sick, these are the ones that will make me depressed. Nature has prepared us not to worry too much about our personal demise or about the planet's demise. What has prepared us to do is to grab all the almonds from the almond tree, because you might not meet another almond tree. And if you grab them all, then your family will survive. And we are the children of those guys who didn't think of the world at large, but just their family. We survived. The other guys who said, no, I'll just take a few almonds and let other people eat as well. Well, they didn't leave as many descendants. So, of course, there are tendencies in humanity also to be altruistic, and they have their hypothesis of how altruism is also passed through the genes. But certainly, by and large, the conflict is between individuals, between nations, can be better viewed, makes more sense under the prism of avarice that is wired up in us.
You could have written your novel about anything, two divergent pathways, two different ways of being brought up with exactly the same genetic makeup. Why did you choose an environmental message in the end?
Right. Well, I needed the twins not to be certainly in the same house, and I needed to show that there can be adjustment in the behavior according to the environment. That is, in the sense, I mean, theoretically, you have two people with the genetic endowment of Jesus, according to the heroine in the book. It's her view, who knows? And I wanted to show the psychological influences outcome on behavior. Psychologists know about identical twins raised apart, what to expect about whether they'll be congruent, agreeable in certain behaviors, or disagreeable. For example, on the issue of sex preference, if I am homosexual and you are my identical twin, then the probability of you also being homosexual is 50%. Now, that's very high genetic contribution. But at the same time, it shows that genetics are not the only determinant of behavior, but the environment has a large 50% role. So I wanted to show that. I mean, it had to be a novel, and I knew some psychology, I knew some neuroscience. These are the things I knew. And while it is a hard task to write fiction, to write literature, I did have some benefit in that I knew something. And of course, I had to use what I knew in the novel. So you will find a lot of neuropsychology. You will see issues of freedom that you mentioned earlier, of free will. And you will see that the characters display no free will. And you will not miss the free will. You will not find them odd. They're just as any other character.
Because it does fly. I lived in America for about 10 years. It really does fly in the face of like, I'm who I am because I am, and I made all these choices and I've got a better outcome than the guy living on the street because I made all these choices. But I guess you're trying to say is like, no, you are who you are because you got born where you did by the parents you got born at the exact day, time, hour, minute, second, in the exact location that you did. And the way that your life unfolded gave you what you got.
Yeah, exactly. And indeed, this can be demonstrated even in the life expectancy of people. Native groups in the US, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Canada, live 7 to 11 years less than non-natives in the same countries. And they contract dementia, Alzheimer's and other dementias, 11 years earlier. If that's not the condemnation of the society, then I don't know what it is. That is the most... I
was just up in Darwin, like literally I got back from Darwin yesterday, and the just ravaging effects of colonization 252 years ago now are still evident. And it's just harrowing to know that a 48-year-old man, exactly the same age as me, has such a less life expectancy than I, and we live in the same country. It makes it's mind-boggling, and it's not okay.
That's right.
But that's hard for a lot of people to accept.
That's right. In fact, she mentioned the U.S. When I was also for a decade in North America, I studied there, and when I came here, the thing that made me the happiest was that the garbage men were white. Because in America, at 5 o'clock at Yale, the color changed from white professors to black cleaning personnel. And Australia, then I think was actually stronger 50 years ago, egalitarian. The hello mate, that mateship issue, I think, is an instantiation of the Enlightenment period, of giving a chance. And the polarized more now, the rich have become richer, more numerous of them perhaps. And I mean, you have the paradox of high schools in the poorer areas of Sydney introducing nobody to university from that cohort. That is, what the society has to attend is the disparity of income, because even for the function of the brain, nothing is better than actually being born, would you believe, in a rich family. Again, why then should be such a disparity and the poor really be undertrodden? And the many reasons that the dementia will come earlier in the poor people, less attention of the mother during pregnancy to check for diabetes gestational, less attention to nutrition, more knocks on the head, more alcohol for the mother or for the child afterwards, living in busy streets and breathing exhausts. All these things are predictors. So the society has to look at this disparity, and again in America it was also color coded.
Oh, it's that way here too. Let's not think we're above that. I've never spoken to anyone who knows not only so much about their brain, but I guess other people's brains, the actual anatomy of which bits. Oh, that'll be my singular cord. Okay, no, that's an amygdala response. That's not right. It's different fear than the other one, What have you come to know about consciousness, your own consciousness, George?
Right. Well, consciousness is what the philosophers call the heart problem. That is, neuroscience will tell you a lot about the brain, and you can consider everything mechanistically. But then there's this issue of if you have enough neurons, you can fall in love. I mean, so that is a subjective state. Consciousness, nobody has given a good definition of it, but they've described it. It is something that we have more of when we talk to each other like now, something that we exile during sleep, something we have very little or none during embryologic development, something that we are losing more and more during dementia. So you can see the complexity of consciousness diminish with dementia, the shrinking of the brain by, like an analogy, so shrinks consciousness to the point that a person doesn't recognize their friends, doesn't recognize their children. They don't recognize who they are. Their vocabulary is restricted and they can't say anything. So consciousness is, you can see it in us. You can also see it in the different scale, in the evolutionary scale, from us, who display a complex level of consciousness, to the rat that displays consciousness but not also complex, to the octopus, to some beetles possibly. That is, you can find it. Certainly the chimpanzee is highly conscious and even self-conscious, because they'll be able to look at themselves in a mirror and adjust things that you've placed on their head according to their image, and they know it's them and it's not you that they're looking at. Incidentally, I remember the time I saw myself in the mirror, and I was convinced it was the other boy. We didn't have mirrors on Ithaca, not many at that time. They hadn't been exposed. I remember that. And I was walking, so it was not too early. So, yeah, it takes a bit of time. And so we know what it is, but then how does that relate to what people used to call the soul? And psychologists, by the way, don't use the word soul anymore. Since the 1930s, no academic psychologist uses the word soul. And it would be cruel if they were to, because if you are saying your behavior is the result of your soul, well, I mean, this child has bad soul. It doesn't work. You can say that we can see if there's some abnormality with your hormones, and we give you some hormones or whatever, but not the soul. And they will use, of course, the word mind. And you might say, oh, well, that's convenient. You change the word soul for the word mind, and you get out of it. No, psychologists have to be accountable to that also. But they say, of course, psychologists, if the soul is where stimulations become perceptions, where decisions are made, logic resides, love is manufactured, memories are stored, then there is no reason to hypothesize its existence, because there is already an organ who performs these functions, the brain. But they can't get out of this. Consciousness is a big problem for neuroscientists, because now you have, just for a moment to digress into the robotics people, who artificial intelligence, who are saying to you that more and more we are getting robots that resemble humans, and soon enough they will feel love. Well, Osher, I have not seen a Mac computer fall in love with an IBM computer, not even with another Mac. It just, I don't know how that works. I am puzzled, and I am not a religious person. But there is something there that is not accessible. We know that it's the workings of the brain, because when the brain shrinks, so does consciousness.
Yeah.
But we don't know how that is done. It's a mystery.
Tell me then, what? Well, because I mean, I find it fascinating that we have this brain that various cultures have found a way to induce this meditative state, whether it be through various rituals or ceremony, this meditative kind of trance-like thing that our brain can do. And there's religious ways that can do it, and there's completely, atheistic ways to do it. But our brain can do this thing, and we can put it into this state where it does stuff that it otherwise doesn't do. And I kind of find it interesting that kind of got ritualized along the way.
Yeah, well, of course, hypnosis is a phenomenon that psychologists study, and they can explain some things about that. But these phenomena can be studied, and these approaches might be suitable for some treatment of something that you want to improve in your behavior. For some people, psychologists are experimentalists. They don't have a hang-up if it is hypnosis, but they certainly will not study anymore clairvoyance or telepathy. These things do not exist as phenomena. There were decent efforts to study them in the 1930s, before the 1930s, and then psychology has abandoned them. Nobody of the grant-giving agencies in Australia and the US will give you funding to study these phenomena. The scientists have no confidence in these things.
There are some things that do go on that we haven't yet explained. And I'm a science guy, George. I 100%, I'm a science guy. But there's things like, I'm not asking you for an explanation, but for example, when my grandmother died in 1992, I was working overnight. I was doing a job as a roadie for a band, and it was 3 a.m, and I was sitting down watching television, just trying to relax, eating a sandwich, and I felt ants crawling over my skin. And I looked at the clock, and it was 3:07. The next morning, the phone rang on a Sunday morning. It was my aunt calling to tell my mum that their mother had died. And it was right after 3 a.m. Now, I don't believe in an interventionist God. I don't believe in any of that stuff. But that happened. I'm fascinated to know what it was. I don't think it's something spooky. I don't think it's a spirit. But there's something. And I'm fascinated by that.
I have friends who actually likewise tell me similar experiences, that they dreamt that their father died, and guess what? Their father died. I dreamt that my father died. He didn't die. The thing is that there's some selection happening. That is, of the 7 billion dreamers in the planet, because everybody dreams, right? Some of the dreams will become reality the next day. And guess what? Who goes on the media and say, I dreamt my father died and my father died? Only those who became reality. Nobody will go on the media and say that I dreamt my father died and he didn't die. That's not news. So there is selectivity here. So psychologists will immediately check the conditions around that. Now, the other thing is that before you look at the possibility of some transmission of the information through other things than telephone and things such like that, to look at the mechanism that's possible. Darwin's theory of evolution was accepted rather readily by the scientists because he proposed a mechanism, natural selection. There's no mechanism that this will work. And psychologists tried this with putting people between walls and presenting to them cards and asking the person across to communicate and see if they can pass on the card that they see. It just doesn't work. And every time they tried, in scientific way, it didn't.
Yeah. George, you mentioned that you're not a religious person. Is there something that you, George Paxinos, is there something that you are in awe of? Is there something that you are reverent before?
Well, I'm puzzled about our existence. The fact that I look at my grandchild, he walked through a room and ignored everybody and rushed to hug my legs. I mean, that is a beautiful feeling, but I don't know how it comes about. That is, this is different than molecules, electrical impulses, chemicals in the brain. I know what parts of the brain are activated. I know what drugs will activate similar parts, some of the same, in fact, to actually give you this euphoria without the natural event of your grandchild showing you affection. I know a lot of these details, but I am missing the big picture. And I just cope with that in the following way, that a cockroach will never ask the question, why did this apple fall on me and it didn't fall upwards? It certainly will not find the answer of gravity. That's because it has a small head ganglion, a small brain. And us too, we have a brain that can ask these questions, but it cannot go beyond that. There are some questions that are difficult for it. As to whether there is a divine, certainly the ones that are on offer are faulty, are deficient, and they are contradictory. And if you really look at it, in some ways, everyone in the world is an atheist as it concerns the religion of the other person, the other religion. So even they, the Greeks here where I'm now, all of them believed in the 12 gods of Olympus. Oh, not all of them, but many of them. And now they believe in other gods. They don't believe in the other in the previous gods. Who are the correct gods? Certainly, what's on offer is not logical, and expecting people to live after death. Just keep them alive now. Why resurrect them?
Well, the way that you seem to be going about things, George, please keep up riding your bicycle up and down the mountain. Please keep jumping in the Mediterranean, and please keep thinking in the directions you're thinking, because we need brains like yours to help other brains learn how to be brains like yours. George, I could speak to you for hours, and I'm, as I said, not a religious guy, but I am all for the Church of Hugs, full stop. You give me a hug, I'm happy. Let's go. I'm here for that. Human connection.
That's the most important thing. When all is said and done, because I can see now life from the rear view mirror. And I remember the kids in high school that were fighting over this, that, and the other, and competing, and who is going to get into university and all that. At the end, I see the families that are hanging together, the friendships, and love is actually more important than anything. And even that, of course, early upbringing can predispose you. So if I were to say anything, attend to your friendships. You get from friendships what you invest in them. Attend to your brother. Don't fight with them over property. It just will alienate you, your children from their cousins, and you from your brother. You'll gain far more than the material things that you might if you insist on your fair share of something.
Amazing. A River Divided is the book. It's one of the 57 books you've written, so there's plenty to choose from. Mm-hmm. George, thank you so much, mate.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.